Welcome back to Sledgehammer Horror, guys. I am Ken Sledge, and let's talk horror. Now, today I am joined by the amazing A.L. Davidson. How you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I am doing very well. Would it bother you if I called you Al throughout the interview?
Not at all.
Okay, just like wanted to make sure that I wasn't
Yeah.
offending. Um, I'm super excited to have you here. But before we talk about why you're here, Al, I would like for the people that don't know you to get to know you a little bit. You are a writer who specializes in massive space operas and tiny disturbances.
Mhm.
You write stories about ghosts, grief, isolation, space exploration, eco horror, queerness, and the human condition all around, while living in Kansas City with your amazing cat Jukebox. So I always ask, when you are a writer, when you are an author, how did that start for you?
I was hanging out with my best friend. We've known each other since preschool, and I was about 10 years old, and we were having one of our normal play dates, and she had a book, and I was immediately drawn to the cover, and I was like, what is this? And I spent the entire time of our play date reading that book, and I was like, I want to do that. I want to have that ability to captivate people like that. And my parents were very supportive of that, to where the point that they went out and bought me like a laptop at like the following week to be able to like support that. So it's one of those that I've been doing this for, writing stories and stuff for decades. That's weird saying that, but for decades at this point. So
Well, I mean, and it's one of those things where the tiniest little thing can flip your whole life around.
mhm,
If you wouldn't have gone on that play date, who knows if you'd be the person that you are today. So
right.
those are the little things I love. And you like I said, you write a lot of different things. Is there a certain place where people can find some of your work?
Yeah, I have them on my website, which is Disturbances by Alicia, and it's .weebly.com, which is where my tiny disturbances comes from. That's what I call my short stories, because I think it sounds more fun than just calling it a short story.
Right. Well, and the good part about that is I have all of their social media links down in the description. So you don't have to go far if you want to read some of Al's work. And I strongly recommend you do. So the best way to do that is by clicking all the links down in the description, following them on social media so you can stay up to date on everything that they have coming up for you in the future as well. So I know that NDAs and stuff like that exist. And I know you're doing a lot of like the tiny disturbances and stuff like that. But is there anything in the pipeline coming up for you to do, maybe like a full length feature novel or anything like that?
Oh, there's tons. I counted it up. I started writing again like the week after I lost my job due to COVID. And I counted it up with the total amount from that 3-year period mark. I have written on average 55,000 words a month.
Wow.
So it's more of just the fact of like now it's trying to like find agents and submit to publishers. And I kind of got bored of doing that. So now I'm trying to self-publish. And my first Kickstarter or it's my third Kickstarter, but my first one for an actual like novella ended a couple of hours ago. And so that's going to be now heading to my editor and things like that. And I'm super excited about that. And I did before this just get an anthology acceptance email, which is awesome. I was super excited about that one. I had 550 submissions and I'm one of the ones that got picked. So
Awesome. Congratulations. And
thank
like I
you.
said, with these type of things, because I do these interviews a little bit ahead of time before we post them. So make sure you're following Al on social media, like I said a minute ago, because by the time this comes up, how many other things are going to be in the works at that point? So you can stay up to date on all of that. Click these links down in the description, follow on social media, and check out the website as well. Now, in order for you to write some tiny disturbances and to write in the horror world, horror had to start for you somewhere, Al. So now I would
Mhm.
like to go back to the past and
Okay.
talk about what got you started in the horror genre, your first horror movie, and Al, your first horror movie was.
Well, technically, my first horror movie was Halloween at at the ripe old age of 3. And it was a babysitter's fault. My parents were not happy.
Yeah, the your parents came home and they're like, "Oh, it's the babysitter. Yeah, we should have Michael visit here then because this is
Yeah.
horseshit."
Yeah, well, and it was one of those things that they didn't find out. This is the reason why it stuck with me so much, and I didn't realize it stuck with me, but the story is so like legendary in my family that apparently that night they got home and they woke up and found me standing in the doorway in my little nightgown with a kitchen knife. Just like that scene where they find Michael on the driveway, and then that's when my parents were like, "What the heck?" Like, and they found out that the lovely little babysitter decided that it'd be a good time to bring her boyfriend over and watch Halloween with the 3-year-old.
That's hilarious. I mean, I'm
And
sure it
I
wasn't funny to your parents at the time, but
no, no, like waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning to see their daughter standing there with like a butcher knife, like, "Hi."
oh, you'd have got drop kick in this house.
Yeah. Well, and the scariest part is that my dad used to be a like traveling knife salesman, so he had the good stuff. He had the good knives.
He had the stuff that'll cut through a penny.
Yes, yeah, yeah. They said that he was good enough that he could sell a steak knife to a vegan. Like he had those kinds of knives. So, and it's funny is I do not remember much of that happening, but I was watching I'm a huge fan of CinemaSins. Like I love watching them like tear apart movies. And I was watching them do Halloween a couple of years ago, and I saw that scene of young Michael, and I was like, why am I getting like war flashbacks? Like, what is happening? And then my family told me the story, and I was like, oh, okay.
Mhm.
That's like
It's
great.
funny the way that works, because you watch a movie like that and it scars you, and you don't
Mhm.
watch horror for a while after
Yep.
that. So actually, guys, Halloween 1978 is not the movie we're going to be discussing, because, as Al said, they watched that movie at a very young age, 3 years old, and they don't remember much about it. So when it comes to something like that, it's hard to get a true understanding of what happened in a film when you don't remember
Mhm.
watching it. So I'm glad I got to hear the story, though. I've been waiting to hear it. You told me you had an amazing story in the email, and I've been very excited to hear it. So,
It's a great story. It gets told all the time, and I'm like, okay,
right,
thanks.
that's fantastic. So, well, we know that that was the movie that like really scared you, startled you as a child.
Mhm.
But what was the first horror movie that you remember watching voluntarily all the way through on your own?
It was The Conjuring. It was the first Conjuring film. And it's funny because I had a very like love-hate relationship with horror throughout most of my life because I grew up in a very religious household. And so it's one of those things that if you're watching something, it was gonna be like Scooby-Doo, where it's like, oh, we can debunk what's happening. So I grew up on a heavy diet of Scooby-Doo, and then one of my big family events was every Wednesday night we'd order a pizza and we'd sit down and we'd watch Ghost Hunters on Sci-Fi. And because it had that like logistical side of things, and we watched like Ghost Adventures. And so after I got to my adulthood point, and I'm kind of like, well, the survival horror gaming genre really started to like grab my attention. I was like, well, maybe I should
Sure.
try watching the movies. And the first one that I really said I remember watching was The Conjuring, because it had that ghost hunting, we're gonna debunk it. It had a little bit of that religion side of things. I'm like, well, this could be a safe first step into the horror realm. And it changed a lot of things. I love the Conjuring universe. I'm a huge fan of those films.
Well, you kind of dove in head first, because the first Conjuring is quite terrifying.
It is.
Um, we'll talk about it in a little bit, but it has one of my all-time favorite jump scares ever. So, do you remember about how old you were when you had decided, you know what, I'm going to sit down? I've been playing some Resident Evil, some Silent Hill.
Mhm.
I've been doing the survival horror. I even did Countdown Vampire. Shit, I did all of them.
Yeah.
Do you remember about how old you were when you were like, you know what, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to tackle this fear and I'm going to watch The Conjuring?
It would have been, well, because Conjuring came out in 2013. And so it probably would have been about the time that it would have come out on DVD, because weirdly enough, I lived within walking distance of a Family Video. There was still a Family Video that existed, and you could rent a movie for 5 nights for like $1. And so I would walk up there, and it was bad because like in the span of a week, I watched Fight Club for the first time. I watched V for Vendetta for the first time. I watched The Conjuring. I watched Hush. And there was something else. Like I watched all these like films, and I'm like, what am I doing to myself?
Right.
But it probably would have been, so I would have been, because one of the reasons the flip of that was both of my parents passed away in 2011 to 2012. And so I was 19, so I would have been like just heading into my 20s, college,
Mhm.
those sorts of things, where I'm kind of like, okay, well, YouTube's becoming bigger. I'm watching people play these games, and so I'm like, well, now the movies are out, so I'm gonna probably sit down and watch The Conjuring. I think it was probably probably right around the time that it would have released on like Blu-ray, because I would have been
Mhm.
able to rent it. So
Well, it's still to this day, like I said, the Conjuring universe is still expanding. We're supposed to be getting a
mhm.
fourth Conjuring film. Hopefully, some fucking day we'll get the Crooked Man film. Been really, really hoping for that. But
Yeah.
do you remember which scene it was from the Conjuring that affected you the most?
Where Lorraine walks out of the house and everything's just really quiet, and she's like walking towards the tree and walking towards the lake, and then Ed kind of follows her out there, and she does that slow turn back, and you start to hear the creak of the tree, and all you just see is her feet. And the chemistry between Vera Farmiga and Patrick Wilson is just
Yeah.
outstanding, to the point that you believe every single thing that was happening in that scene. And it was because again, that's my biggest thing, is that for me it was that, because starting with Halloween, you have that like preconceived notion of every horror movie is going to be this bloody, horrible slasher. And I like
Mhm.
those movies that make you think. And
Yeah.
so I sit down and go like, oh, there's like substance and like intellect to what's happening here. It would absolutely change the way that I saw horror forever. Because my favorite horror film is The Autopsy of Jane Doe. And I love that
Ooh.
methodical, like again, as I work in a funeral home, but I love that like methodical thought process of this slow unraveling of things. And I had that in The Conjuring, where it's like everything just kind of like slowly gets unraveled, which again, being a big fan of ghost hunting TV shows, it's like we have to figure out the mystery and what's happening, but it's like there's actual terror happening. It's not just, four dudes screaming into the night because I saw a bug.
Right. Well, my little buddy Ghostface is pretty sad now because he was going to come up later and ask you what your favorite scary movie was, but you just told us it's The
Yep.
Autopsy of Jane Doe, and we watched that recently, and we were looking at some of the trivia on that movie, watching some of the behind the scenes, listening to the commentary, and what a lot of people don't know is there was never ever a body double used for that
Mhm.
film. She was I can't think of the lead actress's name now, and I apologize, that played Jane Doe, but um, it was her the whole
Yeah.
time. And that's amazing. The only thing is she had to grow pubic hair because if they were able to see that area,
Yeah.
the movie would not have gotten an R rating. And to me, it's just like, that's the weirdest, that had to be the weirdest reading of all time. Like, oh,
Yeah.
you want to be in our horror movie? All you got to do is grow some pubic hair and never move. That's all you got to
Yep.
do.
And she did
Just,
phenomenal. She was so believable.
her
And
eyes are just so
yeah.
scary in that movie, man. Like, and then like you hear about what she went through and the witch trials and like
Mhm.
things like that, and like, oh, it's such a scary movie and fantastic ending. What a
Yeah.
fantastic ending. And so many little twists and turns all throughout the movie that are just so fun. Like you hear earlier in the movie how there's a bad storm, then at the end on the radio you hear him saying, oh, another beautiful day here. It's like
Mhm.
that she controlled everything, and to
Yeah.
me, so beautiful. What an amazing story. She did a great job. Emil Hirsch was fantastic
Yeah.
in that movie.
The whole
Um,
cast was great.
yeah, another movie I could talk about for hours
Yeah.
because it's phenomenal, but we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about The Conjuring. And
Yes.
The Conjuring is one of those films that started off as a singular film based
Mhm.
on Ed and Lorraine Lauren and what they did, but it turned into an entire universe of
Yeah.
films spanning over 9 films now, if I'm remembering correctly. We're right around, between 6 and 9. We're right in
It's
that
going
area now.
it's going to be 9 once the second Nun comes out later this
Yes.
month or in September,
Yes.
whenever it decides to come out.
Now, a question I always ask, because, especially when we have franchises like this,
Mhm.
this franchise started with The Conjuring for you, but
Mhm.
what is your favorite movie in the Conjuring universe?
The most controversial opinion of all is I love The Devil Made Me Do It. Um, and it's one of those that, because as someone who specializes and writes horror romance stories, I love getting to see the dynamic of Ed and Lorraine and their relationship and how it's like progressed. But again, it has that incredible scene where you have them in the morgue where she's like channeling everything, and the forest scene, like everything about that movie is just like, it has the true crime elements. It's just one of those that like I can watch that movie over and over and over again and just completely be enthralled with it. It's so good.
Total love story. Like, it's a
Yeah.
total, like you said, when Ed's chasing Lorraine through the woods, and
Mhm.
Lorraine, when he sees her right at the edge of that cliff
Yeah.
and he's all sweating from the heart attack, like, oh God, I'll marry you, Ed. Like, if that's what it
Right.
takes,
Yeah. Yeah.
take me with you, Ed.
Somebody.
Um, right. Well, and I talked earlier, and anybody that knows me knows, one of my favorite jump scares of all time is this one.
Look what you made me do!
When I say that scene terrified me, like, I hadn't watched this movie in probably 10 years. And my wife was at work. The kids were off at grandma and grandpa's. I was sitting at home alone, and I'm looking through, all my DVDs, my Blu-rays. I see The Conjuring. I haven't watched this movie in a while. And I had completely forgot about that scene. And I'm sitting there just watching it. That scene happened. And I was literally like, oh, shit. Like, I forgot it was happening. And I think that's one of the most perfectly timed jump scares because you
Yeah.
see her walk by and you don't know. So that kind of leads into my next question. We talked about which scene affected you the most. But Al, what would you say your favorite scene from The Conjuring is?
Oh gosh. I don't know. The thing is that it has such a nice balance of like the storytelling scenes and the horror scenes. Like the whole thing with the mother in the chair in the basement is absolutely insane, where she's like flipping upside down, and then the sheet rips and you see Bathsheba's face and it's not the mom. But even, getting to know the family, because I think that's the thing that makes the Conjuring films so enjoyable, is that it's not just Ed and Lorraine Warren. You have the families as well, as you get to see them move in and get to, and all the kid actors are so phenomenal. So everything from like them just doing the initial investigation to where like Ed is like holding up the camera and he goes, look at this new camera. It's so light and it's like twice the size of his head. Like everything is just it's so well timed, and it's so hard to pick a favorite. Like, again, I do really love the Bathsheba scene because it is such that slow build, something's coming, but you don't know what it is kind of thing. And you really get to see the chemistry between the leads, and it kind of sets up this whole like, oh, something is actually happening here and it's big. But yeah, like you're trying to pick, it's either probably the Bathsheba scene or like when they're actually like confronting her in the basement, because that scene is awesome.
Yes. And just that turn when she turns, you see that face, like it's just so amazing. And I'm a huge fan of the Conjuring universe. I wasn't over the moon about the first Nun movie. I thought it could have used a better story. To me, it was just like, how can we get from jump scare to jump scare to jump scare? The gothic scenery was great. I thought a lot of the cinematography was good. But man, the Curse of La Llorona just really bummed me out. Like, as someone that comes from a very strong, very proud Hispanic background, doing the Curse of La Llorona in Los Angeles, California was very upsetting to me. Yeah. I would have much rather have seen that take place in Mexico, where it actually would have made a lot more sense to me.
Yeah.
But I mean, we're nitpicking now. So usually I would ask you about your favorite horror movie, but we know that is The Autopsy of Jane Doe, which is such a phenomenal choice. So I want to remind everybody that I have all of Al's social media links down in the description. So make sure you're following them to stay up to date on everything they have coming up for us and more. But before I let you go, Al, we always bounce back to the same question. We're going to bounce back to the first Conjuring. And what we're going to do is rank this movie on a skull count. Now, we're not ranking it on acting, production, score, direction, nothing like that. We're not being critics. All we're doing here, Al, is strictly ranking this movie on how much it affected you on your first viewing. So 0 skulls being not effective, 5 being extremely effective. You can use half and quarter skulls anywhere in the middle. Al, what would your ranking of The Conjuring be?
I would say it's probably going to be about a 4, 4.5. Like, it was because again, it was the first one that I watched after all these other things, and it kind of changed my perspective of how horror was seen, because you see, when you think of horror, you think of Freddy, you think of Jason, you think of Michael, you think of Leatherface. And so having that like slow burn, intelligent, kind of similar to The Exorcist, things just kind of slowly progress and move and things like that. And you hadn't seen that in so long. It completely changed the whole way that I looked at the genre of horror. Because even when you're playing like survival horror games, it's Resident Evil, you're shooting things. It's The Evil Within, you're shooting things. And so it's like, wow, there's so much more to this than what I thought. And it's a beautiful film. I watch the whole trilogy constantly. I love it.
See, I'm in the rarity. I think the second one's my favorite. I love the second one. I still get goosebumps at the train scene with the he won't let me go, like that. Is still like
that's a brilliant scene.
Yeah. I love that so much. Like, I love that setup. Everything about that is phenomenal to me. So Al, thank you so much for coming on, taking time out of your day to come on and talk about how horror started for you. But please don't go anywhere. I got a couple more questions for you. Everybody else, if you haven't already, please like and subscribe. It really helps the channel more than you know. And follow Sledgehammer Horror on social media. All our links are down in the description as well. But until next time, keep talking horror, stay what you are, and we'll see you guys soon.